The first thing our eyes noticed was the light. It spilled to the tall glass windows like liquid gold, flooding the quiet art gallery with a warmth that felt almost sacred. He had only stepped inside to escape the harsh afternoon sun, his young daughter asleep against his shoulder, her tiny fingers clutching the collar of his worn shirt. But then he saw it, the portrait, and everything inside him stopped. His breath caught, his steps froze, and the world around him dissolved into silence. Because the woman in that painting was his wife. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the mysterious ways life brings people back together, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. You never know whose story might touch your heart today. ROI stood there, unable to move, as if his soul had been pinned to the polished wooden floor beneath him. The portrait was large, elegantly framed, placed at the center of the gallery wall as though it held special importance. It captured a woman in soft daylight, her face turned slightly to the side, her eyes filled with quiet strength and something deeper, something that felt like unspoken pain wrapped in grace. He knew that face. Not just knew it, he had loved it, lived with it, memorized every expression, every curve of her smile, every flicker of emotion in her eyes. Zoya, his wife, the woman he had buried 2 years ago. Our eyes blinked rapidly, his chest tightening as disbelief collided with memory. The hospital room, the beeping machines, the silence that followed. It all came rushing back like a storm he had barely survived once and was now forced to relive. But this was impossible. His daughter stirred slightly in his arms, her soft breath brushing against his neck. He adjusted her gently, his fingers trembling, as he took a hesitant step closer to the painting. The closer he got, the more undeniable it became. The delicate curve of her eyebrows, the faint dimple on her left cheek, the calm intensity in her gaze. It was all Zoya, alive, not just alive in memory, but captured in vivid color and detail, as if she had been standing there just yesterday. Our eyes life since her death had been a quiet, exhausting struggle. Every morning began with the same heaviness, the same dull ache that never quite left his chest. Raising his daughter alone had been both his purpose and his pain. He had learned to cook meals he once burned, to braid tiny strands of hair with clumsy fingers, to hum lullabies in a voice that often cracked halfway through. He had become both parents, even when he barely felt like half a person. There were nights when he would sit on the edge of his bed, staring at Zoya's old photograph, wondering how someone could simply vanish in the world and leave behind so much unfinished love. He had never truly accepted her absence. He had only learned to carry it. And now, standing in front of this portrait, it felt like the universe was reopening a wound he had tried so hard to stitch together. A quiet voice broke through his thoughts, gentle yet steady, belonging to a woman who seemed to be part of the gallery staff. She approached him with curiosity, noticing the way he stood frozen before the painting. Our eyes turned to her slowly, his eyes still clouded with shock, his voice low and strained as he asked a question that felt both impossible and necessary. "Why is my wife in that portrait?" The woman hesitated, clearly taken aback by the intensity in his expression. She glanced at the painting, then back at him, as if trying to piece together a truth she hadn't expected to uncover today. She explained that the artwork was part of a private collection, recently donated by a reclusive artist named Meher Aslan. According to her, the artist rarely displayed her work publicly and had only agreed to this exhibition under special circumstances. Each painting, she added, was inspired by real people the artist had encountered during her life. Real people. The words echoed in ROI's mind like a whisper from another world. His heart began to pound harder, not just with confusion now, but with something else. Something fragile and dangerous. Hope. He asked where he could find this artist, his voice carrying a quiet urgency that made the gallery attendant pause before answering. She mentioned that Meher Aslan was expected to visit later that afternoon to review the exhibition. Our eyes didn't leave. He couldn't. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as he sat on a nearby bench, his daughter now awake and quietly playing with the edge of his sleeve. His eyes never strayed far from the portrait. Every glance felt like both a comfort and a torment, like seeing a ghost that refused to fade. As he waited, memories resurfaced in vivid fragments. The day he first met Zoya in a crowded marketplace, her laughter rising above the noise like music. The small apartment they had shared, filled with mismatched furniture and dreams too big for their space. The night their daughter was born, when Zoya had held the baby close, tears in her eyes, whispering promises of a future they would build together. A future that had been stolen. Or so he thought. Late in the afternoon, the gallery doors opened again and a woman stepped inside. She moved with quiet confidence, her presence subtle yet commanding. There was something about her that made the air shift, something that drew attention without demanding it. Our eyes felt it instantly. He stood up slowly, his heart racing as his instincts told him this was her. Meher Aslan, as she walked deeper into the gallery, her eyes scanning the artwork with a thoughtful calm. Our eyes felt a strange pull, as though he was being guided towards something he had spent years searching for without knowing it. When her gaze finally landed on him, time seemed to pause again. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Not certainty, not clarity, but something. Our eyes took a step forward, his voice steady despite the storm inside him, and repeated his question, this time softer, heavier, as if the answer might change everything. Why is my wife in that portrait? The woman's expression shifted. Confusion gave way to something deeper. Unease, perhaps even fear. She looked at the painting, then back at our eyes, as if trying to reconcile two conflicting realities. She explained that she had painted that portrait from memory, from a fleeting encounter years ago with a woman who had left a profound impression on her. She described meeting her at a train station, of all places, a brief moment of connection between strangers, where stories were exchanged in hurried fragments before paths diverged forever. Our eyes chest tightened. Zoya had traveled alone once, years before their daughter was born. She had told him about meeting someone during that journey, a quiet artist who had listened to her talk about life, love, and the fear of losing it all too soon. At the time, it had seemed like a small, forgettable detail. Now it felt like a missing piece of something much larger. Meher spoke of how that encounter had stayed with her, how the woman's strength and vulnerability had inspired her to paint long after they had parted ways. She had never known her name, never seen her again, but it carried her memory like an unfinished story. Our eyes felt tears gather in his eyes, not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming realization that Zoya had lived beyond the boundaries of his own memories. She had touched lives, left impressions, created ripples in places he had never seen. She had not simply disappeared. She had continued, in fragments, in stories, in art, and now, through this portrait, she had found her way back to him. The grief he had carried for so long began to shift, not disappearing, but transforming into something softer, something warmer. For the first time since her passing, our eyes didn't feel like he was holding on to something lost. He felt like he was rediscovering something still alive. His daughter tugged gently at his sleeve, her small voice breaking through his thoughts as she looked up at the painting with innocent curiosity. She didn't fully understand, but there was a quiet recognition in her eyes too, as if she could sense a connection without needing to explain it. Our eyes knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, and in that moment, he realized something that changed everything. Zoya was still part of their story. Not just in memory, but in the way she had shaped their lives, the way she had inspired others, the way her love continued to echo through time in ways he had never imagined. Before leaving the gallery, our eyes turned back one last time, his eyes meeting the painted gaze of the woman he had loved and lost. But this time, he didn't feel broken. He felt whole. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Take a moment to comment, and share with someone who needs to believe in the power of love and connection. And subscribe to Heartfelt Stories to keep these emotions alive. And before you go, here's a special request. Comment the word "remember" if you believe that the people we love never truly leave us.